They say the city never sleeps. But what if something else doesn't either? Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, where whispers linger in the steel bones of forgotten buildings, where shadows ride the last elevator, and where the dead never really leave. This is not a story told in screams. It is told in silence, in flickering lights, in the cold breath behind your ear at 3:13 in the morning. Tonight, we ride the lift to where time stands still and something waits just beyond the doors. You're listening to The Elevator That Stopped at 3:13 a.m., a call from the other side. Draw the curtains, dim the lights, and don't look too closely at the reflections in the mirror behind you. Because once the elevator arrives, you might not ride it back alone. The elevator bell rang at exactly 3:13 a.m. It wasn't loud, not the kind of jarring buzz that woke you with a start. No, it was soft, almost polite, a dull, hollow ding that echoed faintly through the thin walls of Lynn's apartment, like a memory knocking. She didn't wake because she heard it. She woke because she felt it. She had only just moved in 2 days ago. Her boxes still sat unopened by the tiny window that overlooked the concrete courtyard below. Her mattress was bare, lying flat on the floor, its plastic cover crinkling each time she shifted. Outside, Hanoi hummed with the usual late-night hush, a few motorbikes still crawling by, dogs barking somewhere distant, but mostly just silence, layered on old buildings. Lynn sat up slowly. She checked her phone. 3:13 a.m. exactly. And then again. Ding. She blinked. That wasn't her door. It was coming from the hallway, from the elevator. Her apartment was on the 15th floor, the top floor. There were only 2 units here, hers and 1502, which hadn't shown signs of life. No shoes outside the door, no mail, no lights. Lynn pulled on her hoodie. The air in the room was cold, despite the summer heat, the kind of cold that comes from the inside, not the weather. Her bare feet padded softly across the tile as she stepped toward the peephole. The hallway was empty. She opened the door just a crack. The fluorescent light flickered softly above the lift at the end of the corridor. The elevator doors were open, waiting, but no one was there. Just silence. The still hum of machinery far beneath the ground, like the kind of silence that presses on your ribs, that tells you not to speak. She should have closed the door, gone back to bed, blamed it on the building, told herself the elevator was just faulty, like the water heater or the dripping tap in her sink. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped into the hall. The elevator hadn't moved. Its polished steel doors reflected her like a warped mirror, thin, tired, her eyes wide with the stiffness of someone too alert for the time of night. She walked closer. There was no one inside. The lights glowed dim, and the floor indicator above flickered slightly between 15 and nothing. No arrow, no direction. She reached out and touched the edge of the door. It was cold. Not metal cold, something else, cold like wet stone. Then the doors closed softly, on their own, without her pressing anything. Lynn stepped back, startled. She heard it move, slowly, the faint clatter of chains or gears somewhere beneath the ground, like something being lowered rather than lifted. Then silence. She went back inside, locking the door with a sharp twist. Her apartment felt different now. The shadows deeper, the ticking clock louder. Lynn sat on the floor by her mattress and turned on a small nightlight, the kind shaped like a moon. She wasn't scared, not really, but she didn't sleep for the rest of the night. And the next morning, she forgot to mention it to the security guard downstairs, not because it wasn't important, but because it already felt old. Like something she wasn't supposed to say aloud. The next night she stayed up,
Not out of fear. She told herself it was curiosity. She worked late into the evening, headphones in, editing wedding footage for a client. But as the clock neared 3 a.m., she found herself pausing more often, checking the hallway camera through her app, adjusting her chair so she could see the door. At 3:13 a.m., the elevator dinged again. This time, she didn't move. The sound was just the same, clear, hollow, soft, like it was announcing something to someone, like it wasn't mechanical at all. She waited, 10 minutes, 15, but the camera showed nothing. No one had entered, no one had pressed the button. She watched the footage back just to be sure, played it at half speed. There was no movement at all, but the light above the elevator flickered just once at 3:13, and just before the timestamp rolled to 3:14, the elevator door opened, then closed. She replayed it again. Her eyes narrowed. When the door opened, something on the camera shimmered, just for a frame, a distortion, like heat or mist, right in front of the lens. She sat back. This time she didn't sleep at all. The next morning, she stood beside the security desk, sipping her instant coffee, eyes heavy. The night guard was an old man named Kwong. He smiled at her the way someone smiles at a tired grandchild. "You're up early," he said, flipping through the lobby's camera feeds. "Couldn't sleep," she murmured. Then, after a pause, "Do you hear the elevator at night?" He looked at her. The smile faded, slowly. "You mean it stops on your floor?" She nodded. "At 3:13? He asked, voice lower now. Lynn didn't answer, but her face told him enough. Kwong sighed, then looked away, pretending to focus on the screen. "It's an old building," he said. "That's not what you mean." He hesitated, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "It's just the building," he said again, but this time it sounded more like a warning than reassurance. Later that day, she met one of the other tenants, Mrs. Han, from the 11th floor. The woman was in her late 60s, pushing a cart of groceries into the lift. Lynn offered to help. As they rode up, the woman smiled politely, then said, "You're the new girl in 1501. "Yes." "Don't worry if the elevator wakes you." Lynn blinked. "You hear it too?" "Everyone does. But it only stops for certain people." "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. She stared at the numbers climbing on the elevator panel. Then she whispered, "Just don't answer the call." That night, Lynn didn't turn off the light. She sat with her back to the wall, near the door, phone in hand, the hallway camera open. 3:10 a.m. She watched the seconds crawl forward. 3:12. Her heart beat faster, even though she told herself it wouldn't happen again, even though she told herself it was all just old wiring. Then, ding, right on time. She looked at the camera. The elevator doors opened, and this time, there was someone inside. But the camera didn't show their face. It was just a shape, a human shape, standing perfectly still, facing forward. Lynn stared, breath caught in her throat. The figure didn't move, didn't press any button. Then the doors slowly closed. Lynn opened her door. The hallway was still, empty, silent, but she swore for just a moment she smelled something strange, wet jasmine, and something else like burnt paper. She closed the door slowly. She checked the footage again. The figure was gone. No movement, no exit, no trace. Just one frame, when the doors were almost fully closed, where something reflected back in the steel panel. A face, but not hers. The next morning, Lynn stared at her hallway security footage again. She had replayed it 7 times already,
pausing each time the elevator doors slid open at 3:13 a.m. The figure inside remained an ambiguous shadow. No face, no clear outline, just the shape of someone standing perfectly still. She zoomed in on the floor display above the elevator. It showed the number 14, only she hadn't pressed it. No one had. She checked again, frame by frame. The hallway camera had motion detection. It hadn't recorded anyone arriving, anyone pressing a call button, or even passing through. But the elevator came anyway. It opened. It waited. It showed the 14th floor. And then it left. There were only 2 people on the 15th floor, herself and whoever or whatever lived in Unit 1502, which still showed no signs of life. So why did the elevator stop on 14? And why at that hour? Lynn leaned back and rubbed her eyes. Something wasn't right. That evening, just before sunset, she took the elevator down. It felt slower than usual. The old building groaned behind the walls, the lights inside flickering once between the 9th and 8th floor. She pressed the L for lobby, but just before reaching the ground floor, the elevator braked sharply, stopping on 14. She hadn't pressed it. The doors slid open. The hallway was dim. A single overhead light buzzed, casting a pale yellow stain across the floor tiles. There were only 2 units, 1401 and 1402. Both doors were closed, no sounds behind them. She didn't step out. Instead, she leaned out carefully and looked down the hallway. It was empty, but something on the floor caught her eye. A long, dark scuff mark across the tile, like something heavy had been dragged. It trailed from the elevator across the hallway and stopped in front of Unit 1406. But there was no Unit 1406 on this floor. It shouldn't be. Lynn pulled back. The doors closed. Her stomach tightened as the elevator resumed its descent. Downstairs, she found Kwong again. She waited until the lobby was empty, just her, him, and the soft hum of the standing fan in the corner. "I took the elevator down earlier," she said quietly. "It stopped on 14. Kwong didn't turn his head. He stared at the screen in front of him. It showed the elevator's movement log. "Did you press 14? "No." "Then someone else did." "There was no one." He sighed. "Then it was called." "By who?" "Doesn't matter." His voice was firm now. "It's just the building." "That's not good enough," Lynn snapped, her voice a little louder than she intended. Kwong finally turned to look at her. His eyes were tired, not just with age, but with knowledge, the kind that weighed heavily, like stories never told. He reached under the counter and pulled out an old maintenance logbook. The cover was faded blue. He flipped through a few pages and pointed at an entry dated 4 years ago. "Elevator override. Called to 14F, approx 3:15 a.m. Unresponsive to reset." Lynn read it again. Unresponsive to reset? "It stopped. Doors wouldn't close, like something was in the way." "Was there?" Kwong didn't answer. He just closed the book. Lynn returned to her unit with her mind whirling. She tried to work, but the footage wouldn't leave her. The hallway on the 14th floor, that scuff mark, the number on the panel, the absence of any button being pressed. She pulled out her building directory, the one she got when she signed the lease. It listed all floors and all units. The 14th floor showed 4 apartments, 1401, 1402. No 1406. No 1405 either. She flipped to the next page. No extra info, just an empty column where those addresses should have been. She opened Google Maps and tried entering Unit 1406 Orchid Tower. Nothing. Just a street view of the building. Sealed windows, cracked stucco. She looked up at her hallway monitor again. 3 a.m. She didn't want to watch tonight, but she knew she would. At 3:13 a.m., the elevator rang. This time, she didn't just watch. She recorded it on her phone as well, needing another set of eyes, some form of sanity check. The hallway camera lit up. The elevator doors opened. The floor indicator said 14. And standing there, just like the night before, was the figure. Still, silent. But this time, the figure turned. Not toward the hallway, but toward the camera. Lynn's blood froze. It had no eyes, no face, just smooth, shadowed skin where a face should be. And yet, somehow, she knew it saw her. Then the feed glitched, static rushing across the screen like a wave. When it cleared, the elevator was empty again. The doors slowly closed. Lynn sat there in stunned silence. The image burned into her mind. She replayed the phone recording. Same thing, the glitch, the shape. She paused on the last frame before the static. Something had changed. The figure's arm was raised, like it was pointing at her door. The next day, she went to the 14th floor. It was a foolish decision, but the dread didn't subside even after sunlight crept in and filled her apartment with false warmth. Something had to be seen, proven, or at least disproven. She took the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the 14th floor landing, she paused. The hallway smelled faintly of old incense and mildew. She counted the units. 1401, 1402. No 1403. No 1404. Just a blank stretch of wall where there should have been another door. But then she noticed something. A faint outline beneath the peeling paint, like a doorway had once been sealed over. She reached out and pressed her fingers to it. It was warm. She jerked her hand back. Something shifted behind the wall. A thump, dull, like a knock from the other side. She ran. That night, she taped a piece of paper over her peephole. She unplugged her hallway camera. She didn't want to see the elevator, but she heard it. 3:13 a.m. Ding! And then, 3 slow knocks on her door. She didn't move, not even to breathe. The knocks came again, then silence. But when she removed the paper the next morning, something was scratched into the wood around her peephole. Tiny, jagged letters. You pressed the button.
Lynn stopped leaving her apartment after dark. The elevator had become a sound she could no longer separate from her heartbeat. Even during the day, when the soft ding echoed through the building, she found herself flinching, a reflex born not of surprise, but memory. It wasn't just the noise now, it was what followed. The silence that came afterward, thick, waiting, like the breath before something spoke. She hadn't told anyone about the knocks, or the words carved around her peephole. Not even Kwang. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she saw the way he avoided her eyes now, as though he already knew something and wished she didn't. Instead, Lynn tried to forget. She filled her days with work, music, noise, anything that drowned out the thought of the elevator's slow arrival each night. But that night, she made a mistake. She left her window open. The air outside smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. Distant thunder rolled somewhere beyond the river, but the sound was faint, almost gentle. She fell asleep with her laptop still open, the faint light flickering against the ceiling. At 3:13 a.m., the elevator bell rang again. And then, something else. A voice, soft, singing. It drifted up through the ventilation shaft like a thread of smoke. A woman's voice, whispering in a language that wasn't quite clear, half Vietnamese, half something older. Lynn sat up. The melody was familiar. It took her a moment to place it, an old lullaby her grandmother used to sing when she was a child. Sleep, my little one, The night has teeth. Her grandmother used to say it was a charm, a way to keep wandering souls from finding children in their dreams. Now the same tune was echoing through her walls. She turned off the light. The sound came from the elevator shaft. Lynn crept out of her apartment, barefoot, holding her phone like a weapon. The hallway was dim, the fluorescent tube above the elevator flickering in lazy intervals. She stood at the far end, staring at the closed doors. The singing stopped. She waited. Then, as in answer, the elevator bell chimed again. Ding! The doors opened, empty. But her reflection wasn't right. She was standing several feet away, but in the mirrored steel, she looked closer, too close. Her reflection's eyes were opened wider, her mouth slightly parted, her posture tilted forward like she was leaning in to listen. And then, in the far corner of the reflection, just behind her image, stood a girl. A pale, thin girl in a long white dress, her hair covering her face. Lynn turned around. No one. She looked back at the reflection. The girl was still there, still standing, still watching. Lynn stumbled back, hand over her mouth. Her reflection did the same, but the girl didn't move. The doors began to close. The last thing Lynn saw before the elevator sealed shut was the girl's feet, or rather, the absence of them. The hem of the dress ended abruptly, in empty air. The next morning, Lynn waited in the lobby until Kwong arrived for the day shift. "You've seen her, haven't you?" she said quietly, before he could even greet her. Kwong froze. Lynn continued, "The girl, the one from the elevator." His face was pale. He looked over his shoulder, as if expecting someone else to be listening. "You shouldn't say that," he whispered, not out loud. "Why not?" He didn't answer immediately. He just walked to the corner of the lobby where an old photograph hung, a black and white image of the building's opening ceremony. Workers lined up in neat rows. The elevator doors gleamed in the background. He pointed at the bottom corner. Lynn leaned closer. There was a young woman there, standing slightly apart from the others, head bowed. Her face was blurry, as though the camera had caught her mid-movement. But even in the blur, Lynn could see her dress, the long white one. "Who is she?" Kwong said nothing. "Who was she?" Lynn pressed. Finally, he exhaled. "They say she was the first one to die here, before the building even opened." Lynn felt a chill crawl up her arms. "How?" Kwong's eyes flicked to the elevator doors behind them. She fell. That night, Lynn dreamed of falling, of cold steel, rushing air, the echo of a bell ringing endlessly, of hair whipping around her face as darkness opened below. She woke gasping, the smell of rust and oil thick in her nose. But when she opened her eyes, she wasn't in bed. She was standing at her door. The hallway camera blinked red. The elevator was open again. She didn't remember walking there. She didn't remember anything between the dream and this moment. Her phone buzzed softly in her hand, a new voicemail. She pressed play. Static. Then faintly, a voice, a woman whispering, 14. She froze. She looked up. The elevator display glowed faintly in the dark. And then, behind the hum of the speaker, she heard something else. A soft, dragging sound, like bare feet moving across tile. By morning, she was shaking. She called her mother in Da Nang, pretending everything was fine, her voice too high, too bright. She went to work at a cafe nearby,
avoiding the building until dusk. When she returned, a neighbor, a young man she'd seen in the hallway before, held the elevator door open for her. 15th? He asked, pressing the button. She nodded, forcing a smile. He looked at her for a moment. You live up there? Yes. Don't take the lift after midnight. My cousin used to live on 14. He said someone always rode with him, even when he was alone. Lynn swallowed hard. What do you mean? The man hesitated. You'll know. You'll feel it when she's there. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a faint movement behind them. A soft shuffle, like fabric brushing metal. Lynn turned. No one. The young man frowned, staring straight ahead at the door. She's here, he whispered. The lights flickered, and for just a second, Lynn saw it. The reflection of a girl in white standing between them, her head tilted, her hair floating as though she were underwater. Then the light steadied, and she was gone. When the elevator reached 15, the young man bolted out without a word. Lynn stood frozen for a long time. She watched the doors close again, and as they did, the reflection shifted once more. The faint outline of the girl still standing there, her face hidden, her bare legs dissolving into mist. Lynn whispered to herself, barely audible, "Who are you?" And though the elevator had no voice, no breath, no soul to answer, she swore it whispered back through the hum of the steel walls, 14.
It started with a phone call. Lynn had just finished boiling noodles when her phone rang at exactly 3:13 a.m. She froze. The apartment was silent except for the slow hiss of the gas burner. Outside her window, the city slept beneath a smear of clouds. The number flashing on her screen wasn't familiar. No name, no digits, just the word, unknown caller. Her thumb hovered over the screen. It stopped ringing before she could decline it. Then, instantly, it rang again. Same unknown caller. This time, she answered. At first, there was nothing, just faint static like an old cassette left too close to a magnet. Then, a voice. Soft, hoarse, female. It whispered, 14. Oh. 6. Then the call ended. The silence that followed rang louder than any scream. Lynn's chest tightened. She stared at the black screen of her phone, its glow fading into the dark. Her reflection in the window looked back at her, pale, wide-eyed, blurred by the glass and the steam from the pot. Unit 1406. But that unit didn't exist, did it? She grabbed the building layout again. No 1406. And yet, she remembered something. That sealed-up section on the 14th floor, the outline of a doorway under flaking paint, the knock behind the wall. Maybe it did exist once. Maybe someone had hidden it. By sunrise, she was at the management office downstairs. A woman in her 40s sat behind the desk, typing something on a laptop with cracked plastic casing. She barely looked up. "I live in 1501, Lynn began. "I have a question about a unit on the 14th floor." "Maintenance issue?" "No, historical." That made the woman pause. Lynn continued, trying to sound casual. "Was there ever a unit 1406?
She blinked, then smiled, tight, automatic. "No, dear, no such unit. Maybe you misread." "I heard it used to exist. Maybe during construction?" Now the woman's smile faltered. "I don't know anything about that," she said quickly, eyes flicking back to her screen. "Could you check?" "I'm sorry, that information isn't available." She began typing again, harder this time, as if to try to make Lynn go away through sheer force. Lynn left the office with her heart hammering. It wasn't the woman's denial that rattled her. It was the fear in her eyes. That afternoon, she returned to the 14th floor. She brought gloves, a small hammer, and a roll of white chalk tucked in her backpack. No one saw her enter. The hallway was quiet, dusty. The overhead light flickered but stayed on. She walked slowly to the section of wall where the strange scuff marks had been. The paint looked newer here, an awkward rectangle of slightly different color. She tapped the wall. Hollow. She knocked. Silence. Then, faintly, one knock back. Lynn stepped back, shaking. She crouched, pulled out her chalk, and gently traced the faint outline of a door. It was there, buried beneath a layer of plaster. A door frame, and right where a peephole would be, she found a small circular patch of paint, slightly raised. She pressed her palm to it. It was warm again, like something breathing on the other side. That night, her phone rang again. 3:13 a.m. She didn't answer. Instead, she let it ring, then checked her voicemail. Again, there was static, but this time, the voice didn't say numbers. It whispered her name. Twice. Lynn. Lynn. She deleted the message. Then, her apartment lights flickered. Once. Twice. The elevator camera pinged. Elevator. Arriving. Floor 14. The next morning, she confronted Kwang. She didn't ask politely this time. "You told me she was the first to die here," Lynn said, placing her phone on the counter with the voicemail queued up. "You know there was a Unit 1406. Why is it gone?" Kwang looked tired, older than before. He didn't ask how she found out. He didn't ask what she'd seen. Instead, he reached under the counter and retrieved a file folder. It was old, water-stained, sealed with string. He handed it to her without a word. Inside were photocopies, faded blueprints, handwritten notes, and a news clipping from 12 years ago. A headline: "Teen girl found dead in elevator shaft, Orchid Tower construction delayed." Lynn's breath caught. The article described a 17-year-old construction worker's daughter who had wandered into the building at night and fell down the open shaft of the unfinished elevator. The body was not found until days later. She had apparently been living in the empty shell of Unit 1406, squatting there while her father worked the night shift. Kwang spoke softly. They sealed it after the accident. The family was paid off, no ceremony, no shrine, just silence. Why? They said the building needed to open. No ghosts, no bad luck, so they erased her and built over it. He looked up at Lynn, his eyes heavy, but something was left behind. That evening, Lynn went to a spirit shop. She bought incense, white thread, a black paper talisman. The old woman who ran the stall didn't ask many questions, but before she left, She handed her a small pouch. "Tie this near the door," the woman said. "If it burns by morning, leave." Lynn nodded, numb. That night, she returned to the 14th floor. She tied the pouch near the sealed door, lit 3 sticks of incense, and whispered a prayer her grandmother used to say for wandering spirits. "Don't follow me home, don't follow me in dreams. Eat this scent. Rest." Then she left. The hallway remained quiet. The elevator didn't ring. For once, there was no knock. But at 3:13 a.m., her hallway camera blinked on. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor. There was no one there, just the burning remains of the pouch she'd left tied to the wall. And scratched into the floor, faint but unmistakable, were the words, "I never left."
Ling dreamed of humming, not a melody but a vibration, low, constant, as if the building itself was alive and murmuring to her in sleep. Her dreams were narrow shafts of steel and cold breath, filled with distant echoes that never quite formed words. When she woke, her ears were ringing. It wasn't silence, it was listening. She stopped using the elevator altogether. Each morning, she took the stairs, counting her steps under her breath. 15 floors up, 15 floors down. She welcomed the ache in her legs. The sting in her calves reminded her that she was still in her body. She wasn't sure how long that would last, because the voice was starting to follow her, not just through the walls, but inside them. That evening, the hallway lights blinked again. She stood by her door, holding a bowl of salt water in one hand, the other clutching her grandmother's old rosary, even though she wasn't particularly devout. Faith wasn't the point anymore. Protection was. She approached the elevator. The doors were closed, but she could feel it, waiting behind them. She had a plan, not to stop it, but to listen. She brought down a small voice recorder, the kind journalists used. She placed it inside the elevator on a loop, recording from 2:30 a.m. to 4 a.m. She used a timer to make sure she wouldn't have to be there when the doors opened. When she placed the recorder on the floor, she swore she heard a faint click from the ceiling. The shaft above was darker than it should have been, blacker than just shadow, as if it absorbed light. She pressed record and stepped away, the doors closing silently behind her. The next morning, she retrieved the device. It looked untouched, but when she played the audio, her blood went cold. At first, it was just static, then soft mechanical groaning, the elevator shifting in its shaft, normal sounds. Then came the whispering. Not one voice, several, layered, overlapping, too quiet to understand, like a room full of people speaking behind a thick wall. She turned the volume up. The voices grew louder, not clearer, just closer. Then one voice rose above the rest. It wasn't whispering. It was humming. The same lullaby, the one her grandmother used to sing. Ling dropped the recorder. The sound kept playing. No matter how many times she deleted the file, it remained. She even changed SD cards. Each time she recorded new footage, the same track appeared as if the elevator itself was rewriting the audio. And every time, the humming came earlier, closer, like it was learning when she listened. That night, she stood outside the elevator again. She didn't bring a recorder this time. She brought her phone, switched to voice memo, and held it close to the crack between the doors. There was no movement, no sound. But when she pressed record, something whispered on the other side. Just one word. Help.
She staggered back. The elevator did not open. The floor display remained blank. But behind the metal, something breathed. Ling visited a monk the next day, not in the city, but at a small pagoda on the outskirts, one her mother used to take her to as a child. The monk was old, almost translucent. When she told him about the elevator, he didn't laugh or question her. Instead, he simply asked, "Did they ever bless the foundation?" "I don't know." He nodded, unsurprised. When something dies before its time, its voice has nowhere to go. The shaft is like a tunnel for the soul. If it isn't sealed... He trailed off. Ling leaned forward. Then what happens? The monk met her eyes. It never stops falling. He gave her a bundle of yellow cloth marked with black ink symbols, a talisman for wandering spirits. He told her to place it near the mouth of the shaft, not inside, never inside, and to sprinkle white ash around the elevator's base, then to walk away, no looking back. "No matter what you hear," he said, "don't answer." That night, she waited until 3 a.m. The building was asleep. Even the city outside had quieted, as if holding its breath. She approached the elevator and laid the talisman down with shaking hands. The ash trembled in her fingers as she circled the base. Her breath fogged the metal, but the surface remained ice-cold beneath. As she stood up, the overhead light blinked once. Then, ding! 3:13 a.m. The doors opened. Empty, but only visually. Because the moment they parted, the humming returned. No longer distant, it poured out of the shaft like warm breath, wrapping around her ears. And from the black mouth above the ceiling, something shifted. A creak, a whisper. "Why did you leave me?" Ling turned and ran. The next morning, she checked the elevator. The talisman was gone, the ash scattered. And carved in the back wall of the lift, right where the floor met the metal casing, were 3 words: "Still falling, still." That day, she heard the humming even with her windows open, even in daylight. And worse, the voice began using her name. Not in anger, in longing. "Ling, Ling, help me climb." And one night, when she passed the closed elevator without stopping, the shaft echoed back. Tap, 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 like someone was trying to knock their way up from the bottom. The first time Lynn saw the thread, it was by accident. She had dropped her phone near the elevator, her hand shaking from yet another 3:13 a.m. voicemail whispering her name in a broken, gasping voice. The call always came from no caller ID. The messages were always the same. "Lynn, help me. Climb." But this time, when she bent to retrieve her phone, her eyes caught something tucked in the corner where the metal floor met the wall. A thread. Black, frayed, nearly invisible unless the light hit it just right. It wasn't string. It wasn't hair. It was placed there. Coiled in a tight knot, looped 3 times around the bottom corner of the elevator, secured with what looked like dried wax and crushed charcoal. The residue stained the steel like old fingerprints. It hadn't come from nowhere. It had been left behind. Lynn took a photo, enlarged it, analyzed the marks. She searched forums, message boards, old Vietnamese ritual posts. The answer came from a forum buried deep in a thread about spirit houses and ghost binding spells used in old buildings. 3 loops of black thread, sealed with burnt wax and ash, a boundary knot, not to keep spirits out, but to trap them in. Her breath caught. The ritual had been there all along, and now it was coming undone. That night, she returned with gloves and tweezers. The black thread was still there, barely visible. She didn't touch it, not directly. Instead, she held her phone flashlight up and followed the lines. The thin black trails ran from the corner of the elevator up the shaft, disappearing into the darkness above. She could only see a few inches before the light was swallowed whole, but the sense was clear. It wasn't thread, it was a tether. The old monk had warned her, don't break what was never healed. So Lynn did the opposite of what every part of her wanted. She didn't cut the thread, she followed it. At 3 a.m., she returned with a spool of her own thread, black, hand-dyed, and a small jar of ash she had begged from the pagoda, wood burned in prayer. On her phone, she had downloaded the mantra used in ancient ghost-binding rites, the kind whispered during old rituals before elevators existed, rites that had been adapted in modern buildings to keep wandering spirits from traveling upward, from escaping the point where they died. At 3:09 a.m., she began. She looped the new thread beside the old one. 3 turns, 1 knot for the body, 1 for the name, 1 for the shadow. Then she dipped her fingers in the ash and pressed 3 marks above the elevator doors, 1 on the left for remembrance, 1 on the right for resistance, and 1 in the center for release. The lights flickered. The hallway trembled, just slightly, but enough that her knees locked. Then, ding! The elevator opened. Empty. But this time, it didn't feel still. The air inside pulsed like a heart beating somewhere below. And from the darkness of the shaft, something moved. She didn't see it, but she felt it, like fingers brushing the inside of her skull. The thread snapped. Just one. Just the old one. It came loose, coiling like a cut nerve onto the floor. The humming started again. Not in the shaft, inside her apartment. She turned and ran. When she returned home, the scent of ash clung to her skin, and in the middle of her living room floor, resting like it had been placed there, was a single footprint. Small, bare, wet, as if someone had stepped in from the shaft and crossed her threshold. She barely slept. The next day, she hunted through old records, building permits, obituaries, construction logs, and there, buried beneath the redacted entries, was a note. Incident resolved with black thread right, per contractor's request. Do not remove seals without spiritual supervision. Must be renewed every 10 years. The file was dated 12 years ago. Her fingers shook. The seals had expired, and she was the only one left to redo them. That night, she called the monk again. I tried to renew the thread. It snapped. It didn't work. The monk was quiet on the other end of the line. Then he said, she's not tethered anymore. Lynn whispered, then what do I do? There's only one place the thread can be tied now. Where? The origin. The bottom? No, the monk said. The body. Lynn stared at the floor beneath her feet. The elevator had never been about travel. It was a trap, and someone had undone the final knot. Now the girl was riding again, and there were no more boundaries between levels, between living floors and dead ones. That night, the elevator didn't stop at 14. It didn't stop at 15. It didn't stop at all. It rose through the building like a whisper, then descended again, slower, quieter, as if carrying something it had finally picked up. Lynn heard it return to the lobby, then descend lower, and lower, below the basement, below anything mapped, and from the shaft rose the sound of footsteps, soft, rhythmic, climbing.
The building had a memory, not a written one, not the kind kept in files or blueprints. It lived in the walls, in the cracks of tile and the hum of old machines. It remembered things that no one else dared to. And at 3:13 a.m., that memory stirred. Again. Lynn sat in front of her laptop, eyes locked on an email with no subject line, no sender, just one sentence inside. You weren't supposed to know. She stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, but she couldn't bring herself to respond, because deep down, she knew she wasn't being warned. She was being watched. She couldn't stay in her apartment that day. Every corner whispered, every wall pulsed with old breath. Even the floor beneath her mattress felt thinner, like something was pressing upward. So she left. She needed answers, real ones, and she knew just where to go. The city archives were tucked beneath the district government office, behind a rusted door and a row of broken lockers. The clerk on duty didn't ask many questions when Lynn presented her building's address. He simply grunted and pointed to a dusty back room. Construction reports, zoning violations, deaths, all there. Start around 2010. Lynn spent 6 hours digging through fading files, and then she found it. A tan folder stamped with the name of her building, Orchid Tower. Tucked inside were copies of internal memos, emails, incident logs, some blacked out, others faint with age. One document was dated June 3, 2011. Time of incident, 03:13 a.m., floor 14. Details, elevator system failure, sudden descent, fatality confirmed, witness statement withheld at family's request, shaft sealed until renovation clearance. The name of the victim was redacted, but stapled to the back was a faded photo. A girl with long black hair standing at the edge of the construction floor, wearing a white dress, eyes downcast. Even though the image was blurry, Lynn recognized the outline, the posture, the girl from the elevator. She flipped the page over. A handwritten note was scribbled at the bottom in blue pen. If 3:13 happens again, don't reset the elevator. Let it finish its ride, or she rides with you. Lynn copied the files, printed them, carried them back like sacred evidence. But as she walked through her lobby, Kwong called her over. He looked worse than before, pale like he hadn't slept in days. You went digging, he said, eyes hollow. I found the report. He nodded once slowly, then gestured her closer. Do you want to know what really happened? She didn't answer, just sat down beside him. He pulled a key from around his neck, small, rusted. After the girl died, they didn't just seal the floor. They rewired the elevator, hid what happened, put fail-safes in place to stop it from reaching where she fell. But it keeps going, Lynn whispered, because someone keeps calling it. He looked up at her, voice low and shaking. She doesn't want out. She wants to take someone in. He handed her the key. Maintenance access, he said. Only way to stop the override is from the control panel under the floor. Lynn frowned. Under the floor? Kwong pointed to the lobby. Beneath the elevator, there's a crawl space, an old access tunnel they used during construction.
No one goes down there now, but the override box is still connected. She took the key. What do I do with it? His eyes darkened. If it rings tonight, let it ride. Follow it, but only if you're ready to hear what she remembers. That night, Lynn waited in the lobby. The building was silent. The marble tiles underfoot gleamed with a cold kind of polish, reflecting her shape like a ghost. She stood in front of the elevator, heart thudding. 3:12 a.m. The air changed. The lights dimmed. Then, ding! 3:13 a.m. The doors opened. Empty. She stepped inside. The panel blinked. No buttons were pressed, but the elevator began to move. Down. It passed the basement, then another level, then another. The elevator indicator stopped displaying numbers, just a dash and a slow, pulsing red light. Lynn clutched the key in her palm. When the elevator stopped, it didn't chime. It sighed. The doors opened into darkness. Not blackness, darkness, like the space itself had no memory of light. She stepped out. The floor was concrete, damp, the walls unfinished. A single red bulb swung from a cord above, casting slow, swaying shadows. At the far end of the tunnel was a panel, and beneath it, the emergency control box. She knelt beside it, inserted the key. It clicked, and with it a soft whimper echoed from the elevator shaft behind her. Lynn turned. A girl stood at the edge of the shaft. Not a ghost, not a monster, just a girl. Eyes sunken, skin pale, dress torn and dirty. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Then, faintly, as if spoken behind glass, Lynn heard, "I was here before them. They never let me leave. So now I ride until someone hears me." Lynn pressed the override. The lights blinked red. Then silence. The girl vanished, and the elevator began to rise. Lynn stood in the tunnel for a long time, alone, but not afraid. Because for the first time, the elevator wasn't carrying her. It was carrying a memory. And it was finally going home.
By now, everyone in the building had heard the rumors. They didn't talk about them in elevators or at the mailboxes, but there were glances, longer than necessary, pauses in small talk, doors closed a little quicker. Neighbors lingered just long enough to ask, "Do you hear the elevator at night too?" Lynn never answered. She knew they didn't want confirmation. They wanted denial. After the override was triggered, the elevator didn't stop at 3:13 a.m. the next night. But Lynn couldn't sleep. The silence didn't comfort her. It made her skin crawl, like someone had simply changed the time or the rules. So she checked the security camera feed. The hallway was still. The elevator closed. But then, around 3:41 a.m., it moved. No one called it, no buttons lit up, but it descended, then rose, then stopped at the 8th floor. The doors opened. No one stepped out, but in the reflection on the metal panel, someone was already inside. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. A figure stood at the back wall of the elevator. Long hair, still posture, head down. It never moved. Lynn watched the clip over and over. It wasn't the girl this time. The figure was taller, shoulders broader. A shadow of someone who looked more like a man. She paused the footage on frame 283, the moment when a tenant, someone she vaguely recognized from the 11th floor, entered the elevator. His body passed through the figure, but the reflection stayed, unchanged, as if the shadow was never meant to leave, as if it belonged to the elevator itself. The next day, she tracked down the tenant. His name was Hui, young, friendly, the kind of neighbor who always held the door, always smiled. But when she showed him the video, his face turned white. "That night," he whispered, "I felt cold the moment I stepped in. You didn't see anything?" He shook his head, but I felt watched. She showed him the reflection. Hui covered his mouth. "I didn't want to look at the mirror that night. I remember. I kept my head down the whole time." Lin nodded. "It's safer not to look." The next few days, it spread. Tenants began whispering about a new shape in the lift. Not the girl, but someone else. A man, silent, still, not doing anything, not even reacting, just riding the elevator over and over. Someone called him the phantom passenger. And slowly, more people began taking the stairs. Then the phone recording started. First, it was Lin. She played back a voice memo she had left for herself, just a grocery list from the night before. But buried under her voice was another, a soft, deep whisper. "Going down." She froze. She hadn't been near the elevator when she recorded it. Or so she thought. The timestamp said 3:13 a.m. She didn't remember being awake. That same week, the building group chat went silent. The casual posts stopped. No more shared food deliveries, no more "whose package is this?" And then one post broke the silence. "Does anyone else feel like they're being watched in the elevator, even when they're alone?" A reply came minutes later. "My camera caught something behind me last night. There's no one there, but the mirror shows two people." Then another. "My daughter says she saw a man standing in the corner. She thought he was bleeding." Then, "Is he real?" And finally, at 3:13 a.m. that night, "He followed me out." That account was deleted the next morning. Lin compiled the footage. Over 5 nights, she captured 7 separate elevator rides that included the phantom passenger. Sometimes he appeared right after someone stepped in. Other times, he was already inside. But the pattern never changed. He never faced forward. He never moved. He never had a visible face. Just the shape, like something drawn in shadow. A placeholder for a memory the building couldn't quite erase. Lin brought the footage to Kwong. He watched, silent, pale. Then he said, "It's starting again." "What is?" "There was never just one." She stared. "You mean, it's not the girl?" Kwong nodded slowly. "She was the first, but now the door is open." "Open to what?" His hands trembled. "To others like her, spirits that got lost in the ride, that didn't finish falling. Some got stuck between floors, others, they forgot they were dead." He looked up, and now they're passengers. Lin stood in front of the elevator that night. She didn't press the button. She just waited. The hallway was still. The lights flickered faintly. Then, ding! The doors opened. No one inside, but she could feel it. A chill. A shape just out of frame. She lifted her phone, turned the camera to selfie mode, and held it at the edge of the door. The screen showed her face, and just behind her, a man in a dark suit. No eyes, no mouth, just a face smoothed over,
like fogged glass. She turned around. Nothing. Back to the screen. He was closer, whispering something. But there was no sound. Just one word written on the wall behind him in smudged ash. Down. She backed away. The doors closed, but for the first time, the elevator didn't move. It waited.
It began with calls. Not the ghostly voicemails from unknown that Lynn had grown used to. No, these were calls from the building's own emergency line, the one inside the elevator, the one no tenant ever used. Lynn received the first one at 2:59 a.m. Her phone rang once, stopped. She checked the call log. The number read, elevator, lobby line, +000 000 000 The time, 2:59:47 a.m. It was only after she stared at the digits that she realized something else. The last three numbers, 013. Reversed, they read 3:10, 3 minutes before the doors always opened. She didn't answer, but someone else did. In the morning, the building buzzed with low whispers. Apartment 703's door was ajar. The police were called around 7 a.m. No signs of forced entry, no blood, no break-in, just absence. Mr. Tuan, a retired teacher, was gone. His wallet, shoes, and jacket were still in place. Only his phone was missing. Lynn knew, without checking, that the emergency line had called him, too. That afternoon, she tested it. She stepped into the elevator and hit the red emergency button. A hollow ring echoed, followed by a beep. Then silence. Then a recorded voice. This line is not connected to any operator. And yet, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown caller. No ringtone, just vibration. The call didn't stop until she stepped out of the elevator. She brought it to Kwong. He said nothing for a long time. Then finally, it's reaching out, calling out. For what? He looked at her. Companions. That night, 10 residents received a call at 3:13 a.m. Half of them were asleep. Their phones never even lit up. The other half answered. One woman heard her mother's voice, dead 5 years, whispering through static. One man heard the sound of his newborn baby crying, though he lived alone. Another tenant swore she heard her own voice, begging to be let out. All of them woke with nosebleeds. All of them reported vivid dreams of being trapped in a steel room with no buttons, no exit, only a mirror. And in that mirror, I saw someone standing behind me, using my face. Lynn disconnected her phone, removed the SIM card, switched to an old Nokia that had no smart features. Still, the calls came. They rang once and stopped. Every night, same time, same pattern, no ringtone. Only the number, +000 000 000 00013. And each time she felt it, a pressure in her skull, like someone was dialing her soul instead of her number. The elevator began opening on floors no one pressed. People started writing it off as a glitch. But Lynn saw the footage. At 3:13 a.m., the elevator would rise to the 5th floor, open for 13 seconds, then close, then to the 9th, then to the 2nd. Each night, different pattern, no passengers, no button logs, just doors opening to waiting hallways. And sometimes, just before the doors closed again, shapes could be seen leaning out from the elevator's dark corners, looking, searching. One night, Lynn stayed on the 7th floor to test it. She waited in the hallway with her camera ready. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the elevator arrived. She hadn't called it. No one had. It opened. No one inside. But on her screen, the reflection showed a figure standing behind her, not in the hallway, in her apartment. She turned, ran back up the stairs, burst into her unit. No one. But her front door was open, and on her coffee table, her phone buzzed, screen cracked, a single call log. Elevator, answered. Duration, 1:14. Time, 3:13 a.m. She hadn't touched it. The next day, she found out something chilling. The building's elevator emergency line had been disconnected years ago. There was no number, no operator, no line at all. What had been calling them was not from the building. It was from inside, from the shaft, from the ride that never ended. Lynn spoke to the oldest tenant in the building, Mrs. Nga, who had lived on the 3rd floor since the foundation was laid. "I've heard the phone too," the woman said, clutching a string of wooden beads. "Back then, it only called those who tried to move out, like it didn't want them to leave." Lynn's voice cracked. "What happens if you answer?" Mrs. Nga looked up slowly and whispered, "Then it knows your name." That night, Lynn stayed awake, clutching the Nokia phone in both hands. 3:12 a.m. Nothing. 3:13 a.m. It rang. This time she answered. No sound, only breath. Then her name. Lynn. But it wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a man. It wasn't a woman. It was both, layered, multiple voices speaking in unison. Then, "You rode once, you stepped out, come back." The line went dead. The elevator chimed in the hallway. Ding! Lynn didn't move, but her apartment door creaked open on its own. The hallway light flickered, and in the corner of her living room mirror, a shape waited, not reflected, not imagined, just there, watching, as if to say, "We called, you listened, you belong to the ride now." They always said the building had 3 basements: B1, parking; B2, storage and backup generators; B3, not listed. No lights, no access, no floor button. And yet, the elevator knew it. Sometimes, at night, the panel would skip from B2 to a blank red dash, and when the doors opened, people said they saw something they could not describe. Not a hallway, not a room, just a threshold and the smell of wet stone and burnt paper. Lynn had never tried to go there, not until the night she woke to find muddy footprints across her apartment floor. They weren't hers. They started at the elevator, ended at her bed. She followed them back out, heart pounding in her chest like a drum in a funeral procession. The hallway camera was offline. All the footage from 3:13 to 3:43 a.m. was corrupted, static, and red flashes. And that was the night she noticed it. The elevator display showing B3 in flickering red for less than 5 seconds before going dark again. She had to know. Whatever was down there had crossed a line. It no longer waited to be summoned. It wandered,
So Lynn made her decision. She packed salt, charcoal, matches, a small bell, all the things the old monk had taught her were soul anchors, and a handheld flashlight wrapped in red cloth. She wore white, not for protection, but so the dead would know she was only visiting. At 3:12 a.m., she stepped into the elevator, pressed no button, waited. The lights flickered. Then, ding, and the floor display turned to a symbol she had never seen. Not a number, not a dash, just an empty red circle. And the elevator moved. It descended for longer than usual. 20 seconds, 30, more. As if it was falling deeper than a basement should allow. The air grew colder. Then the elevator stopped with a hiss. The doors opened. Lean stepped out. What lay beyond was not concrete. It was stone, uneven, wet, ancient. The hallway stretched out like a throat, narrow and curved, lined with prayer paper faded beyond meaning. Crumbled incense sticks littered the corners, their ash trailing in unreadable symbols. There were no lights, only the echo of water dripping from nowhere, and ahead something else, a door. Red, old, and pulsing, as if breathing. She approached slowly. On the door was a sign, painted in cracked black ink. "Do not open. She feeds on names." Below it, 5 handprints, pressed in ash. She recognized one of them from the photograph in the archives. The girl. She turned her headlamp on. The light cut through the dark, but the beam bent unnaturally, like it didn't want to touch the door. She stepped closer and heard it. A voice from the other side. "Lean, lean, you called me down. I climbed for you. Open the door." She clutched the bell tightly, rang it once. The sound was thin, weak. The door groaned. The paper talisman she had placed on her jacket burst into flame. She dropped it. The fire didn't spread. It just vanished, extinguished by breath. Not air, breath. She turned to run, but the hallway behind her had changed. The elevator was gone. The stone was now a staircase, descending, further, down, always down. She was being pulled, not by gravity, by memory. Something wanted her to remember, and the deeper she went, the more the walls bled with water, with names, names she'd seen in the building directory, names of tenants who had vanished, their handwriting smeared across the walls like the final scrawl of someone trying to scream. Then she reached the end. A circular chamber, and in the center, a steel shaft, narrow, vertical, too thin to be an elevator, yet unmistakable. It hummed, softly, like something was still moving inside it, something alive. And beside it, nailed to the wall, a red rope ladder, frayed, leading up into the darkness. She looked up. The shaft reached straight through the building, from here to the top. And in that moment, she understood. The elevator was not just a machine. It was a vessel, a spine for the forgotten, and something lived in its bones. Suddenly, she heard it. The sound of the elevator descending, faster than before, louder. The cables above screamed. She backed away. The shaft pulsed. A shape slid down the rope ladder like a spider on a thread. A girl, no face, just blank skin where features should be. Her arms elongated, reaching, grasping for the next rung, as if trying to climb into Lynn's memory, into her body. She screamed and rang the bell again. This time it cracked, but the sound hurt the thing. It shuddered, paused, then lunged. She ran. She doesn't remember how she got back, only that the elevator doors opened on the lobby floor. Kwang was waiting, his eyes wide with fear. "You went down," he whispered. She nodded, shaking. "It's not a floor." He didn't ask what she saw. He just pointed to the corner of the elevator, where the red handprint now glowed faintly. Not paint, not blood, just recognition. It had marked her as someone who went below.
The building was no longer pretending. Whatever veil had once separated the living from the dead, memory from presence, had thinned to transparency. The elevator no longer arrived. It summoned. That night, someone answered the call. His name was Min, young, a software developer. He lived on the 10th floor and often worked until early morning. Quiet, polite, always wore headphones. He rarely spoke to anyone. He hadn't believed the rumors, not until the call came at 3:13 a.m. He answered without thinking, half asleep, eyes still adjusting. No voice, just static. Then, "Lobby, please come down." He hung up. The phone rang again. Same voice, but louder. "Lobby, please come down." Then silence. Then the soft ding of the elevator arriving, right outside his door. The hallway camera caught the rest. Min opened the door, peered out. Empty corridor. He stepped forward, hesitated, looked at the elevator. The doors were open, waiting. He didn't press anything, but the moment he stepped inside, the display read, "Dash," and the doors closed. He never came back out. By morning, his apartment was untouched, his wallet still on the desk, his laptop open to an email draft, his headphones still resting on his pillow. Only his phone was missing, and the elevator log showed no button pressed, just an unprompted ride to nowhere. Lynn reviewed the footage over and over, each frame like a funeral bell. The moment he disappears into the elevator, the flicker of lights, the red mark appearing for just a second on the inside panel, a smear like a handprint sliding downward. And in one paused frame, clear as breath on glass, a shape standing behind men, face to the wall, back arched too sharply to be human, hair hanging like wet roots, mouth open in a silent scream. Kwang refused to speak for a full day. He sat in the lobby, prayer beads slipping silently through his fingers. Lynn approached him just before sunset. "She answered the call," she whispered. Kwang nodded, just once. "He let her know his name," he said. Lynn's voice trembled. "What happens now?" Kwang didn't look at her. Now, she can use his voice. That night, several tenants reported receiving strange voicemails, messages that played by themselves even without being opened. Each one began the same way. "Hi, it's Min. I'm in the elevator. I think I pressed the wrong floor. But I'm not alone." And then the tone shifted. But I'm not alone. And then, in a chorus of voices, layered and drowning, "Let us up! Let us up!" Lynn stopped answering calls altogether. She unplugged her landline, turned off her SIM card on her Nokia, but the messages still came, scrawled on her mirror in steam, etched faintly into the frost on her window, whispered from the elevator shaft even when she wore noise-canceling headphones. "Answer. You heard us. Let us ride." Someone else answered. This time it was the woman in 402, Mrs. Vaughn. She was old, nearly blind. She thought it was her son calling. The moment she answered, the line dropped, and from her bathroom mirror she screamed, "He's in the glass! My son's in the glass!" By the time neighbors broke down the door, the tub was full. The water was black. No body, no sign of struggle, only her phone floating on the surface, screen glowing red. Call ended, 3:13 a.m. Lynn wrote a warning on every notice board in the building. Do not answer calls after 3 a.m. Do not enter the elevator if it comes on its own. Do not speak to anyone who knocks twice and whispers your name. The building manager took the notes down the same day. She confronted him. He said the residents were complaining about fear-mongering. Lynn looked into his eyes. They weren't angry. They were scared. He had answered, too. She could feel it. Kwong gave her a final warning. If you answer again, even once, it won't be her voice. Then whose? He swallowed hard. The building. Lynn tried to leave. She packed, called a taxi, dragged her suitcase to the elevator, pressed the button, but the doors didn't open. The floor display blinked. 3:13, even though it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She turned away, took the stairs. Every flight she passed looked the same. Same walls, same stains, same flickering light. And when she reached what should have been the ground floor, the sign read 13. Not G, not L. 13. She had never seen that floor before. It wasn't supposed to exist. She climbed back up. Every floor now read 13, even her own, even the roof. No matter which way she went, the building had folded her in, and the only way out was the elevator. She returned to her apartment in silence. No calls, no knocks, but that night the elevator arrived on her floor, doors opening without sound, and inside the mirror showed something different. Her own reflection, staring back, smiling, and behind her, Min, standing just over her shoulder, face blank, hand reaching up as if to press a button that wasn't there. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I won't answer." But the elevator didn't need her to, because now it knew how to call itself. Unit 1406 didn't officially exist, but it was still there, behind sealed drywall, beneath layers of denial, between two numbered doors that didn't quite align on the hallway map. And after Min vanished, after the mirror smiled back, Lynn knew she had to go in. Not because she wanted to, but because something was calling her now, from inside. She waited
until the building slept. 3 a.m. She brought gloves, a screwdriver, her phone flashlight wrapped in red cloth, and a matchbox of offerings, salt, 3 coins, and a sprig of dried basil. The hallway was deathly still. No wind, no creaking pipes, no flickering lights. Just the quiet of something waiting. She crouched by the wall between units 1403 and 1405, where the shape of a door once was. She knocked softly, and behind the drywall, something knocked back. Once. Twice. Then silence. She peeled the edges of the wall panel. The plaster was brittle, as if it had wanted to be removed. And beneath it, rusted hinges. A door. Sealed in. Forgotten. Lynn pushed gently, and it gave way with a breath of air that smelled like old incense and mold. Inside, dust, darkness, and time. Unit 1406. The room was untouched. Wallpaper peeled like burnt skin. A mattress slumped in the corner, half consumed by mildew. A child's plastic chair sat alone near the window, facing nothing. There were no mirrors, only shadows. And on the floor, surrounded by a ring of burnt wax, was a tape recorder. Old, cassette style. Its red record button still pressed down, like it had been running for years, or had just started again. She stepped forward, pressed stop, then rewind, then play. Static, crackling, then breathing, wet, shaky, slow. Then a voice, female, young. I hear the elevator again. It comes even when I don't press anything. I think it knows I'm here. Last night, it said my name. I didn't tell it my name. Lynn held her breath. The voice continued. I tied the thread again. I burned the wax, but it keeps coming. I think I'm part of it now. The shaft is not empty. It's full of echoes, of those who couldn't leave. Then silence, and then a whisper close to the mic. If you're hearing this, you opened the door. That means it knows your name now too. Run. The tape clicked off, and the recorder ejected the cassette. On its label, a single word. Repeat. The room shuddered. She turned toward the door. It had closed behind her. The knob wouldn't turn. The air grew thick, almost liquid. She reached for the wall. It pulsed under her hand, and from behind the walls came the sound she would never forget. The elevator bell. But it didn't ding. It screamed. She dropped to her knees, clawing at the door, when something slid under the crack. The cassette. It had returned. But now the label had changed. In red ink, play at 3:13. Lynn checked her phone. 3:12,
59. She scrambled to her feet, pressed the cassette back into the recorder, pressed play. The sound that followed wasn't human, not completely. It was dozens of voices layered together, crying, begging, laughing, some in Vietnamese, some in languages she didn't know. Then one voice cut through the rest. The girl. Calm. Hollow. This is where the ride ends, unless you make someone else press the button. The recorder burst into flame. She dropped it, backing away. The fire didn't spread. It burned in place, clean, perfect, like it only existed for what it was meant to destroy, then faded to ash. The door creaked open behind her. The hallway returned, silent, empty. But the elevator at the end now had its doors open, waiting. The floor display read 1406. She didn't move, not yet. She stepped out of the room, turned, but where the door had been was now only wall again, perfect, seamless, as if she had never entered, as if she had become the echo. That morning her phone vibrated with a single new voice message from Min's number. She played it, just static. Then, she gave me the tape. I gave it to you. Your turn. Press the button. Then a sound, not the elevator, not the bell, a sharp, metallic click, like a button being pressed.
The elevator had stopped pretending to be a machine. It now listened. It called. It remembered. And it never forgot those who answered. After the tape recorder burned to ash, Lynn didn't sleep. Couldn't. The voice still echoed behind her eyes. Unless you make someone else press the button. But she wouldn't. She wouldn't trade someone else's name for her freedom. And yet, every hallway she walked felt thinner, every shadow darker, the air heavier. The elevator waited, and it was growing impatient. She returned to Kwang the next night. He was waiting for her in the lobby, eyes red from weeping. He already knew. "You found it," he said. She nodded. "You heard the tape?" Another nod. He looked down at the rosary in his hands, then whispered, "Then she's chosen you to finish the ritual." Lynn sat beside him, the silence between them stretching like cloth about to tear. Kwang spoke slowly, voice low, like reciting scripture written in secret. "There was once a ritual to seal restless spirits into places they died, not to free them, not to banish them, but to contain them. Because some deaths don't stop, they loop like elevators." He took a deep breath. "That's what the thread was for. Black for mourning, charcoal to bind the memory, ash to weigh it down. But the ritual must be repeated every 10 years, and the one who seals it must offer something." "What kind of offering?" Lynn asked. Kwang looked at her then,
the weight of too many years in his eyes. Your name. The ride could be stopped. The elevator could be silenced. The shaft sealed, but only if someone accepted the binding, became the memory. Not a death, not a ghost, but a keeper. One who watches the door from the inside, so the others don't ride out. You won't die, Kwang said. Not in the way you think. But I won't live either, Lin replied. He didn't argue. He just handed her the spool of black thread, 3 incense sticks, a pouch of ash, and the same bell he had worn around his neck for 30 years. The ritual had to be performed inside the elevator shaft, not inside the elevator, but within the walls themselves, where the memory of her death could be bound before it happened. Not a real death, but a symbolic one. The sacrifice of presence, of return. At 3 a.m., Lin entered the elevator one last time. She didn't press any buttons. She brought no phone, only the thread, the incense, and her name. The elevator moved without prompting, down, past B1, past B2, past B3, into the space with no number, the place with no floor, where time stopped and loops began. The doors opened into the chamber again, but this time the red door was already ajar. She stepped inside, and the elevator followed her, not physically, but spiritually. It creaked and groaned above her like a god made of wires and steel, waiting, breathing. She lit the incense, drew a circle of ash, sat cross-legged within it, and began to wrap the thread. 3 loops around her wrist, 3 knots against her chest, 3 words whispered aloud. Seal the ride. Hold the name. Stay the door. The air thickened, the shaft groaned, and the humming returned. Low, familiar. All the voices calling to her. Lin, you still have time. Just press a button. Send it to someone else. But she didn't. She rang the bell. Once, twice, 3 times, and spoke her name aloud for the last time. The chamber exploded with silence. No light, no sound, just absence. Then, a breath. Inhale, exhale. Stillness. The ride had stopped. Kwang found her the next morning, sitting in the lobby, eyes open, still breathing, but she didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't move. Her hand was pressed to the wall beside the elevator, fingers curled around an invisible thread. He knelt beside her, placed a hand over hers, and whispered, "You sealed it. Thank you." From that day forward, the elevator returned to normal. No more calls, no more shadows, no more vanished neighbors. The 313 bell never rang again. The doors opened only when summoned. The mirrors showed only one reflection. Most tenants forgot the strangeness. Time dulled memory.
Stories turned to rumors, then faded altogether. But Kwong never forgot. Every night, he placed incense by the call buttons. Every night, he whispered her name, not to call her back, but to remind the building. She chose to ride in our place. And sometimes, late at night when the elevator is empty and descending quietly, if you listen carefully, you'll hear a faint hum, a woman's voice. Not crying, not screaming, just watching, guarding the ride, so the others never get out.
Years passed, or perhaps only weeks. Time inside Orchid Tower had a way of folding in on itself. Tenants came and went. The building changed management. The wallpaper was replaced, the lights upgraded, the cameras updated. The strange rumors faded into silence. But the elevator remained, faithful, waiting, sleeping. And beneath its steel bones, something else endured. A thread, a breath, a name. People still felt it sometimes. The cold chill between the 13th and 14th floor, the soft creak of the elevator arriving before being called, the brief flash of a face in the reflection, not theirs, but kind, calm, watching. Some nights the child would wake crying, point to the ceiling, say, "She's riding again." And the mother would hush them, kiss their forehead, whisper, "She won't stop on our floor. She's just keeping others inside." And they would sleep again, safely, because Lin still rode the elevator. Kwong grew old, older than he thought he would live. The building forgot his name too. A younger man sat behind the desk now. The tenants passed him without nods. The incense bowls were removed. But Kwong still visited the elevator every year on the same night, the anniversary of when it stopped ringing at 3:13 a.m. He stood before the doors, held the bell in his shaking hands, rang it once, twice, and waited, just in case. But now he knew the time was close. He felt it in his bones, in the way the building watched him with quiet sympathy, in the way the elevator no longer chimed for him, because it was waiting for the right moment, for his final ride. That morning, Kwong woke at 3:12 a.m., sat up, washed his face, put on his old guard uniform, and walked slowly to the lobby. The lights hummed softly overhead. The desk was empty, the world asleep, except for the elevator, waiting. He stood before the doors, no buttons pressed, and still, ding, the doors opened. Empty, warm. He stepped inside. The panel did not light up. There was no music, only breath, familiar, soft, and a scent he remembered from long ago. Burned basil, charcoal, ash. He smiled and whispered, "Lin." And from the corner of the elevator, unseen by cameras or light, she answered, softly, "I remember you." He nodded, closed his eyes, and the elevator descended. No one saw him leave. No one found a body. Only his key ring, placed gently on the front desk, and a single spool of black thread tucked beside the call button. The elevator still works, quiet, reliable,
It never stops uninvited. It never rings at 3:13 a.m. But sometimes, when no one's inside, the camera catches a single figure, standing calmly, eyes closed. Not lost, not cursed, just remembering. Holding the door so we don't have to.